Okay, so let's start. This is according to our curriculum. This is going to be our class. Let me check. It's going to be our class what? This is our class 7 of Python programming. Okay, just a minute. Allow me to join someone. Okay, so let's start. So we want to see how to handle different exceptions in Python programming. The class is kind of complex, but I want to advise you guys to just watch what's happening. Then you can do your own practice when the video is posted. Okay. So we are going to start by defining an exception because that's what we want to focus on today's Python programming class. So we have to understand what is an exception before we get to understand how to handle an exception. Okay. Okay. So exception handling is a very crucial feature that allows you to manage errors that may occur during the execution of a program. So if you've written a code, then you run it, you run into an error. How are you going to solve this error? This is where now exception handling comes in. So without handling exceptions properly, your program may crash unexpectedly when an error arises. So by the end of this class, you are going to be able to understand what exceptions are and why they occur. You're also going to to learn how to use different functions such as try, except, else, and finally. Then we are going to raise exception deliberately with raise. There's a function called raise. So we shall deliberately raise exception, then we try to solve them. Then we're going also to define custom exceptions in Python programming. So we start by defining an exception. Then I usually write for Python programming. So for easy follow-up, allow me to present my PyCharm screen now. Okay, so let's talk about now error and exception handling. By the end of the class, you're supposed to know 4 things. Number one is you have to understand what is an exception. Number two, you have to know how to use 3 functions, or no, 4 functions. The first function is called try. The second function is called except. The third function is called else. And the fourth function is called finally. Apart from that also, we are going to learn how to define custom exceptions. Then we are going to deliberately raise exceptions. Then we shall try to solve them. So the background of this class is to get to understand the type of errors that occur when you are writing your codes in Python. How can you be able to solve them? How are you going to solve these problems that arise when you are writing your code? So that's the purpose for this class. So what is an exception? An exception, this is a definition. An exception is an event that occurs during execution of a program when you are running your code. Okay, that it disrupts the normal flow of instructions. You've written your code in such a way that you want it to run, then the code doesn't run, it is interrupted. Okay, so when the code is interrupted by an error that has occurred, this event, we call it exception. So an example is that you are trying to divide a number by 0, okay? When you're trying to divide a number by 0, it's going to raise an exception, okay? And so you'll try to access an index in a list that doesn't exist. So you have to know how to solve all these type of errors that are going to occur. So the common exceptions when it comes to Python programming, we have 5 of them. The first type of exceptions, let me write them here so you can. I'll just create a new Python file window. So this one I'm going to call it exception. I hope you can see my screen clearly. The common type of exceptions that we have when it comes to Python programming, the first one called zero division error. So it's just a one word. Suppose zero division zero. We have zero division error. So the zero division error comes when we are trying to divide a number by a 0. Then the second type of error exception we have is a file. You're going to be meeting this error in your code, so you need to be so keen. So the other one is file error. It's just a one word. File not found error. This one is raised when we are trying to open a file that doesn't exist. Just direct from how the names are coming out is the explanation. Then the other one is index error. The index error is raised when accessing an index that is out of range. Okay. For example, when we introduced indexing when it comes to list and tuples. Okay. When you're trying to access a value in a list that doesn't exist, when we come to list in Python programming, that is data structures 1 class, we looked on different types of list methods, and one of them was slicing, whereby you are trying to access value within a certain range in a list. So when you provide a number that is not within the range, you're going to get an error, and the error in that case is index error, because when accessing values in a list in Python, you use index, okay, in a method called slicing. So that's where the index error comes from. Then number 4 type of error you're going to meet is called the type error. So the type error is raised when an operation is performed on incompatible types. I can give an example of data types. Let's go back to our class 1. If you never attended class 1, this is a repetition. I usually record all classes, so you can go back and check what you learned in class 1. We check different types of variable and data types. So when you mess with data types that are incompatible, you're going to get an error called the type error. Then maybe the last type of exception that you're going to get is the value error. The value error is raised when a function receives an argument, okay, of the correct type but an inappropriate value. How? Let's go back to our class 4. Class 4, we talked about functions in Python. Under functions in Python, we talked about the syntax of functions in Python, whereby the syntax, you define a function, then you give a function name, maybe age, then you are supposed to give your parameters, but the parameters are optional. You can leave this blank, then to go to the next line, you come here, and in the next line, you're supposed to write your return, when it's a function, you're supposed to write your return value, but also the return value, you agree that this is optional. So let's concentrate with this defining the function, then you put the function name. In this bracket here, you can either decide, this one is optional, you can either decide to put here value, which is optional, but if you decide to say that age, you say maybe what are arguments that this function should accept, then you can dictate on what arguments that should be accepted by this particular function called age that I've defined here. So when you define your arguments parameters here, and the user doesn't follow the rule, then we are going to find an error called the value error. So what's the value error? This is a type of error that is raised when a function, the function in this case is age. A function receives an argument of the correct type but an inappropriate value. Okay, so you can see how my modules are usually well arranged. All these type of errors come from the past. They come from the past. You're supposed to have checked the past videos and get to understand what was taught in the last class. So last week we were supposed on Monday, because our classes are usually on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We are supposed to have our class 5. Our class 5, this is just a repetition. Our class 5 was talking about data structures 2. Remember, data structures 1 was talking about list and tuples. So our data structures 2 was talking about dictionaries and sets. The class was recorded. You can check it. The next class was about file handling in Python programming. So when it comes to file handling in Python, the module I kicked it out because it's not key, but meaning I recorded the class. The note is available, but it's not key depending on what you want to achieve here at the end of this class. So today as we check our error and exception handling in our module is indicated as class 7. Then tomorrow, being on Tuesday, we're supposed to introduce object-oriented programming. That is, object-oriented programming 1 is going to be, we're going to divide into 2. In object-oriented programming 1, we shall check about the init method, that is the constructor, and then we shall check about understanding the self, how to use self as a function. Then on Wednesday, we shall finish the object-oriented programming by checking object-oriented programming methods such as inheritance, polymorphism, method overriding, and lastly, encapsulation. Then from module 9, I told you by the time you get to module 9, you should be so good in Python, at least you know data types, functions, and all that. So from module 10, because module 10 you're supposed to introduce working with libraries and modules. So here we start now to specialize and get to different direction. If you are interested in data science, you are going to meet libraries like Pandas, Matplotlib, Seaborn, Plotly. If you are interested in web development, which in this case is not our business, you can go and check libraries like Flask and Django. If you are interested in, there are so many differences. There are so many libraries and modules. So it depends with where you want to specialize. But in this case, because now our motto is advancing training, consultancy, and research through data, we shall focus on those modules of data science and analytics, what I just mentioned. Okay, so that's just a brief of what you're going to be doing. Let's continue now. I've already told you different types of errors here on my screen. You can see it. The class is being recorded. So let's go direct now. I want us to see some, let's try to handle different exception. Handling exceptions with try and accept, try and accept. So saying we have different types of things you're going to check, and we are going to check try, accept, else, finally, and raise. So let's try with try and accept, try and, okay. This one's supposed to be with. Okay, let's go on. So to handle exceptions that occur, we use try and accept blocks. So the code might trace an exception, goes inside the try block, and the code to handle the exception, okay, goes inside the accept block. So we want to see how the try block works and the accept block works. So let's try by starting by the zero division error, this one here. So here I want to handle division by zero error. So I'll use try. So I'll say try, then I'll say result is equals to 0. No results, because I want to handle a division by 0 error. So result is equals to 10 divided by 0. Then I say except 0 division error. You can see it's just coming automatically on the screen. 0 division error. Then I go to the next line and say print. I want to print something and say maybe something like error cannot divide by 0. Cannot divide by 0. Okay, so let me see. So this is a general case. Let me see what comes. Okay, then a general view of this, you can have something like try. So remember, we are deliberately creating an issue, then try to solve it. So try, then I say result is equals to 10. Why? No, this one just go. I say except print. So print is if it works, okay? An error occurred that I want to see now. Now assume this. I know it's still going to run, but let's focus on this part. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Let me. Alright, so if the print function was also introduced in class 1, you can go and check how it works. So everything that we are learning today was covered. So we can see has been printed because why? Why has this an error occurred? Because I wanted, if 10 divided by 0 is not possible, I wanted my code to print an error occurred, and I can see it's been printed. So this one is just a I've tried to use generic except block, but here I dictated on the zero division error. Okay, so you're going to catch as we proceed. So let's say you want to catch in specific exceptions. Okay, so it is a best practice to catch specific exceptions rather than catching all of them in one block of code. So this one helps in handling each error type appropriately. How? What do I mean? What am I talking about? So this is not a practical class. It's more of trying to explain to you the types of error that will be occurring. So it's crucial looking forward on where we are heading to. Okay. So let me catching. Let me just call this file catching. Then I can say try. I come and say number is equals to. So I want maybe someone to input a number. So I'll say number. This one was covered in class 3, if I can recall. So number is equals to integer. Then I want a user to input the number. I'm going to call the input function. Then I open the bracket because it's a function. Then I put my question, and that is going to appear enter a number. Then I'll put a space for the person to enter the number. Then I'll have something like result is equals to 10 divided by the number. The number, now what is the, remember this one is a variable. I've defined a variable called number, and I want the user to input the number. So if the user inputs the number, I want to get the result, and the result is going to be 10 divided by the number that the user has inputted. Then except I'm going to call my zero division error and say print error. Maybe when the zero occurs, it's going to print the error. So in what case will the zero division error occur? If the user does what? If the user puts a 0, because 10 divided by 0 is a zero division error. So if the user puts a number 0, it's going to print error. Division by 0 is not allowed. Okay, so division by 0 not allowed. Then what if the user doesn't put 0? Now what is going to happen? I'm going to call another except and say value error. The value error will do what? The value error is going to print something like invalid input. Please enter a number. So what is the value error? If you can recall, the value error is what? Raised when a function receives an argument of the correct type but an inappropriate value. That's how I defined it. So let's see if we run this part of code and see what happened. So enter a number, I put 0, enter, error, division by 0 is not allowed, okay? But when I don't put a 0, maybe enter a number, 3. You can see process finish with exit code 0, it's okay. But what if I say enter a number and I put something like t? T is not a number, invalid input. Why? Because, okay, we have defined that the number should be an integer. You can see here int, then input. But the user has entered t. T is not an integer, okay? So when you put, okay, the user has entered a value, yes, I agree that the user has entered a value, but it is not the required value. Why? It has called the value error. Why is t not a required value? Because t is not an integer. So yes, the user has inputted a value, but it is not an inappropriate value. It is not the required one. So this one calls the value error. I hope you are starting to get it now. Let me create another file. I want to show you how to use else and a try except. So this one I'm going to show you how to use else. So here, what does else does? You have to understand it. Don't forget about the else in control flow. Control flow in Python we covered in class. Was it class 2 or class 3? Here is different now. So the else block in this case is going to it's going to run if no exception is raised. Okay, remember the exceptions that we've defined. So if no exception is raised, else is going to run. So the else is used to separate the error prone code from the code that should execute only. Okay, so if you have else and you have any type of exception being raised, it's not going to run. Let's see how this turns out to be. Okay, so here I'm also going to tell the user to enter a number. So the number should be an integer. So I'd say open the bracket, open it, then I ask the user to put a space for the number, then go to enter, then I say is equals to result 10 over the number now. Remember that's a variable, then it depends with what the user is going to input. Then after doing that, I'm going to except. Except is going to be the zero division error. If the user inputs a 0, it's going to print something in the output, and the print is going to be error division with 0 is not allowed. So I'll just say division with 0 not allowed. Otherwise, if the user enters the user enters a value, for example t, this one should call what? Should call the value error. So I'm going to call the value error and say please enter a valid number. Enter it. Otherwise, here I'm supposed to have the call why the error is coming. Otherwise, so if the user puts a 0, zero division error occurs. It prints this. If the user puts a number that's not an integer, the value error occurs this. Else, this is where else is coming now. Else, it prints the result. Print. So that means if the user now enters the right number, do you get it? So it prints the result is what? The result is what is going to be the result? 10 divided by the number that the user has input, okay? But what is that? Let's go back to our class 3. Calling a variable in the print statement. So what is that? The variable assigned to the result. The result here is 10 divided by the number. So the variable assigned to it is called result. So the result is result. So meaning it should return the right answer. Let's run and see. So in the first case, the user inputs a 0. When the user inputs a 0, it calls the zero division error and prints this. Number 2, when you run this and the user enters something, yes, but it's not an integer, it calls for the value error and it asks the user to enter a valid number. But in the third case, now that is the else statement, if the user enters a number like 5, enter, the result is 2.0. So you can see the result has been returned. You can see now. So else block, the else block, this is what when I say the else block, this is what I'm referring to, this one, this block of code. So the else block, it runs if no exception is raised. This exception is not raised, the zero division error not raised, the value error not raised, the else will run. Okay, I want to show you something else apart from the else. There's something called finally. I've created a new file. So the finally block, we have the finally block. The finally block is used to define actions that should be executed. Used to define actions that should be executed no matter what happens. Like whether an error occurs or not, the block must be executed. Do you get it? Whether the error is going to occur or not, whether an error is going to occur or not, the block of code must be executed. So you can start to imagine where can this one be used. So typically it is used for cleaning up resources like closing file or database connection. I don't want to mention database because we are not in the SQL classes here, but let's try and see what it turns to be. So try, I'll say file, and then the file is going to be something like I want to open a file. So I want to open a file called example.txt. This one should be in quotes. So this is the name of a file. Txt is just a text file. It's just like example.pdf, a PDF file, or example.doc for a document file. Then comma R. What do I mean by R? When I say R, I'm taking you back to class. This is class 7. I'm taking you back to class 6, file handling in Python. Though I said the class is not important because I checked the module so well and I felt like no, we don't need this, but it's coming up here just a little. It won't be coming every time. So when I say R is read, so this file called example.t is going to be read. That's why I write R. So if I write something like maybe something else, it could be maybe open, but when I say R is to read the content in that file. So the content is going to be, because of R, is going to be file.read. So this is a function by itself. Any function, put a bracket. Then I want to print, after reading the file, of course, what should be printed? The content. And what's the content? The content in this case is the content, because why am I saying the content is the content? Because you can see the file.read is assigned to a variable called content. So if I want to read what is inside the file, what is inside the file has been opened by file.read. So if I want to read the content, I just call the content because it has already been accessed. So if the content is not found, I call my except and say except and out. So if the content is not found, what kind of error is this? It's going to be what? File not found. I defined it. File not found error. Okay, file not found error is going to occur if the file is not found. Then it's going to print. I want to direct it to print something like file not found. That is if the file is not found. I'll do my finally now, because here, remember here we are not talking about else. I understand we can use else here, but what are we talking about right now? We are talking about finally. And what is finally? Finally block is used to define action that should be executed no matter what happens. So it's going to be executed no matter what happens. So finally, and it's mostly used when in database connection. So if you are interested in SQL, you can visit our blog. I really share a lot of resources over there. Go and read, it's free. So .close. So if it's not found, the file should be closed because it has no content. Then after close, of course, I want it to print, okay? And it's going to print what? File has been closed. So is this true? Why is it bringing a warning? So a yellow line is a warning. So I'm wondering, why is it bringing a warning? Okay. So let me run this and see what file not found. Okay, the name file is not defined. Why? So file. Why is it telling me? Because I'm, apart from running this kind of error, file not found, I'm also getting another error here. This warning. Let me check what type of warning. So if you want to check the warning, you just come on this warning sign, and then Python is going to explain to you what's happening. File dot. I think this one. This error is just, I don't know, typo in word file. Okay, name file can be undefined. Why? Because I've defined file here. So you can see if I click here, they are highlighted. I don't think if this is an error. Yes, my compiler is not working. Let me see it. So you can see it's still okay. Let's not focus on that kind of warning because at the end of the day, our code is still running. So you can see the file is not found. So why? It is because, let me show you. Let me show you what I'm doing here. I hope I'm not lost in you guys. I'm writing a code to read content in a file called example.txt. This example.txt file, I have not created it. It's not there. I'm just trying to create a problem deliberately to disturb PyCharm a little, okay? I'm just trying to test it. So I'm commanding my code to go and read the content of the example.txt file, to open and then to read. Okay, so after opening the file and reading it, the content of this file are stored inside the content variable. Then I want to print the content. If the content doesn't exist, it's going to raise an error called the file not found error because the file is not there. Otherwise, I'll call this statement. The finally statement must run whether the code is executed or not, it's supposed to run. Okay, so because the file is not there, it's not existing, it's going to stop at file not found. That's why you can see here it's not found. Okay, so let me give you another example on raising exceptions. You're going to get this, or you're not understanding raising exceptions. So what is an exception? Remember, we are talking about exceptions in general, but raising an exception in Python programming is like deliberately raise an exception using the raise keyword. So the raise, when I say the raise keyword, the raise is a function by itself. Okay, so you are deliberately bringing an exception to see it. Oh, okay, so when can you use this? If you're going to be a developer, just building anything, you can use this when you want to forcefully or you want to enforce certain conditions in your code, like it must follow what you say. Okay, that's what I mean here. Let me show you. Let's try to raise an exception if a negative number is input. So I want us to do to raise an exception if a negative number is input. Let's see. So I want to do this. How do you, let's go back to our class 2 control statement. So what is a negative number? A number that's less than 0. We want to raise an error if someone inputs a negative number. How do we start to code? If number is less than 0. Okay, if number is less than 0, but I'm doing an error here. What error have you realized I'm doing? The error I'm doing here is I've not defined the number, so I must define. first. So let's go back to our class 4 functions in Python. So diff, so I want to check if the number is negative. I'll just call my function check number. Then let's go back to functions class. We are talking about parameters. So my parameter in this case is a number. I want the user to input the number. Then after the user input the number, I check the number. So if number, remember this is my parameter, what the user inputs. So if number is less than 0, meaning it's a negative number, okay, I raise an error. So it's less than 0, I'm going to raise an error and say what's going to be the type of error in that case. It's the value error. I want you to master this because the value error, yes, you input something, but it's not the required one. That's the meaning of the value error. So value error, and I is going to type something like negative number. So maybe you are making a database of to store the age of people. Of course, someone cannot be of negative age. So negative number not allowed. Then else. What is going to be the use of else statement here? A challenge to you guys. Can you answer this question before I say the answer? Else is going to work if, of course, if the user doesn't enter a negative number, the user is going to enter a positive number. So else, no need to repeat myself that else if the number is greater than 0, no need to do that. So I just else, meaning if the user enters any number, I'm just going to say the number is now what the user has inputted. So the number is, and what the user has inputted, I call the number. So I'm going to call what the user is going to input. But remember, here I can't call it directly. You can see the error is coming. Why? You can't call what has been defined. Go back to functions. When you define a parameter and you want to call it in the print statement, you call it using the shrink type of bracket, this one. So I call the number. Okay, here I'm supposed to, I can see the error still exists. So because I've called it, I'll have it here. So the number is, and then because I'm calling, I want you to master this, because I'm calling a parameter that has been defined in the function, I use the cat in print. So I put here F, the error has gone. So these types of print, you need to master them so well. But this thing is not working. So okay, I can see why, because the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use try. So I call my function in try, check underscore number. Then the number is, maybe let's say the user inputs -5. Okay, the user inputs -5. Then I'll call my what? If the user inputs -5, what's going to happen? Of course, it's the value error. It's not required number. So accept value error as E. Okay, then I print E. I'm going to explain it, don't worry. From this point I've already explained, this point I'll explain it. Let me run and see. The number is -5. So okay, from here you understand. Here I'm now trying, I want to check my number, like my function called check underscore number. I'm trying to check it. So I put a number like -5, and remember here I've already said if the user inputted a number that is less than 0, it returns the value error, and the value error is the negative number not allowed. But when I call the try with accept value error as E, the E is the one going to be printed. So what if we call a positive number like 5 and run this? Negative number not allowed. So you can see when I call a positive number, negative number not allowed, and it's positive. Okay, wait. Negative number not allowed, and okay. Let me see. Is this less than? This one is greater than. You guys, you're not telling me. So let me run again. The number is 5. So it prints the number, meaning no error has been found. So you must be keen here. I was using greater than instead of less than. So Let me show you something new. Hope you're learning something, at least get something. I want to show you some custom exceptions. This is like an application. Custom exceptions. What is custom exception? You can define your own exception if you want, okay? So you can define your own exception by creating a new class that inherits from Python's built-in exception class. So custom exceptions are useful for handling specific situations that are not covered by built-in exception. Remember when I say this, when I say exceptions, I'm talking about these ones. So when I say custom exception, I'm trying to tell you guys, when I talk about custom exceptions, I'm trying to tell you guys that you are not limited, okay? You are not limited to creating, to using only this type of in Python programming, these ones that I've defined here: zero division error, find not found error, index error, type error. You are not limited to only these. You can create your own exceptions. So I want to show you how you can create your own exception. How do you start? So here I want to show you how to create your that's why I call it custom exception. So for you to create a custom exception in Python programming, which one? Because the other ones, they are inbuilt. But if you want to create one that is not inbuilt, it's a custom one. What you're going to do, you're going to start with class. Then you say class, and then you put your exception name. It's like, do you remember functions, guys? Define. If you want to define a function, say define, then if the function is going to store name, then you put your parameters. It is the same thing, but now we are not using def, we are using class. Then put the name of your your exception, your custom exception. In this case, it's an, let's try to do one for negative number. So let's call it negative number error. You can see it's not inbuilt. I'm the one creating it. So negative number error. Then I must put my parameter. It's going to be what? And it's an exception. Okay. I proceed, I say pass. Then I want, after passing, passing is just like, it's a custom one. So after passing, I want to def. What do you define? I want to write the same code like the previous one to check what the user inputs. If the number is negative, in this case, I'm not going to call, if the user inputs a negative number, yes, I'm not going to call the value. Do you recall what I was about? The user is supposed to put a positive number. If the user puts a negative number, it raises a value error number, a value error exception. What is a value error exception? A value error exception occurs when what the user inputs, it's not the required one, it's inappropriate. In this case, I want to do the same thing. I want the user to input a positive number, but the user is going to input a negative number, but I'm not going to call the value error number, the value error exception. I'm going to call my custom exception, the one that I have defined myself. And in this case, I've defined it as a negative number error. So let's define. The function is going to call the check number. So I'll call it check underscore number. That is the name of my function. And it's going to check the number, so that I come here and say if number, remember the number is available, what this is going to input is less than 0, I'm going to print something in my output, and I'll print something like, okay, sorry, before I print, if number is less than 0, I'll raise an error, and this error is called what? Negative number error. Okay, negative number error, and in this case is going to be negative numbers are not allowed. Okay, negative numbers are not allowed. Then I'll come and say else. So else if the user inputs a positive number, no need to repeat all that. I just print and say the number is number. So I use the cat type of function and say, because I want to call something that has been defined, the number is, I put that, I call the number. So if you want to call in the print, you want to call something that has been defined in the print, use the cat, that one with an F. Then I'll now try. Let me try and check number. Check number. What number do I want to check? Let's say the user inputs -5. Then Control Z. Then except it's going to call what? The negative number error as what? As E. So any exception, just call it as E. It's like in pandas, you'll be calling pandas as PD. So in exception, you call it as E. That's Python. I don't know how to explain that, but that is how Python interprets the code. So, and then it prints E. Okay, I can see an error here. Where is it coming from? The bracket is missing. The error is gone. I run. Negative numbers are not allowed. You can see the user has inputted a number that is less than 5. Let me put a positive 5 and run this. The number is 5. So you can see if the user puts a positive number which is greater than 0, it returns the number is the number that the user has inputted. Otherwise, if the user inputted a number that is less than 0, it raises a negative number error and says negative numbers are not allowed. Wow. I feel like I'm learning Python again, because the last time I did this was the last time I interacted with exception errors was around, that was 2024 October. I used to have some Python classes, so I've been all around in the field of Python programming, but I've not been talking about exception. So let me talk about exception now. Not exception, but except, because it comes from exception. So except, how do you use except? Except blocks are used to handle different types of exceptions separately. So if you're having many exceptions, okay, and you want to handle them separately, use except. Okay, if you're having many exceptions and you want, so this thing is interesting because you are not limited to only using exceptions that are defined in Python programming. You are all round, like you can create your own exceptions and you can raise them in your code so that you can limit the user on how the user interacts with maybe your system in that case. Okay, let me show you except. Of course, it's going to start with try. I want to try a number. The user is going to input a number, so it's going to be int. I start with int. I call my input function, and then I ask the user to do what? To enter a number. And then after the user enters a number, I am going to say, let me say result. This is what we've been doing earlier. It should be 10 divided by, so find result here. I'll be calling it later. Then I'll start by except, and then I'll call my zero division error. So if the user inputs 0, it should be 10 divided by the number, not 0. We don't limit the input to 0. So if the user inputs 0, I call the zero division error, and the zero division error is going to print what? 0 is not allowed. 0 not allowed. So so remember we are under except. So let me call another one. I can call except value error. If the user inputs something like t, something that is not allowed, I call the value error and say print, please enter a number. Maybe the user has inputted a letter, so I say please enter a number. Then the last thing I'm going to call is except, and here I'm going to, let me call what? Except, let me call exception, exception as E. What is it going to do? Just what we've been doing is going to print as E. So this one is going to print. I'm going to call E. E is what I've defined on top there. So I use the F and say unexpected error, unexpected error occurred. Then I call my E now. E. Okay, it's okay. No error, no error. Yeah. Just a warning for spelling. Everything is okay. Let's now test our if it works. So enter number 0, enter. It calls the exception, the zero division error exception. 0 not allowed. Otherwise, I run. The user enters a number T, enter. It calls the value error. Please enter a number. I run again. And the user enters 4, enter. It returns it doesn't return any error. You can see it doesn't return any error. So maybe I was supposed to dictate on something like, okay, let me take you back here. Let me take you back here. Do you remember this part? This part here. I'll copy this part here. Else. Let me try to call else here in except and say else print the result is result. So I run. Enter a number 4. The result is 2.5. So 10. So if this error doesn't occur, this error doesn't occur, this error doesn't occur, else will run. Okay, so meaning the user has inputted the right thing and it returns 10 divided by 4, what the number the user has inputted here, and then the result is 2.5. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so summary of exception or handling. I hope you guys have learned something. I want to show you a summary. Okay, the first thing we've learned here is try. Try is the block of code where exceptions might occur. That's why you've been seeing me start with try. You can see here, like here. So if the error occurs, like a block of code where we an error might occur, you call it, you start by try. Just the one you covered a few minutes ago. What does it do? Except it's going to is where this is where exceptions are handled. How? What do I mean here? Come, you can see here, except this one, this type of exception is handled. Except this type of exception is handled. That's what I mean. Nothing new. Are handled. Then I have else. Else, that's direct. Code executed if no error occurs. Let's go back here. This error has not occurred, this error has not occurred, this error has not occurred, then else will run. I hope that's okay. Let's go to finally. We've checked also the finally. Finally, I say that finally occurs. The code always executes whether or not exception is raised. So code will always be executed whether an exception occurs or not. So we checked the example here. Finally, the file example. Then we also checked raise. Raise, we said used. So if you want to raise an error deliberately, used to raise an exception deliberately. Then we have also checked the custom exceptions. Custom exceptions, creating your own, okay? Creating your own exceptions, classes to handle specific situations. So maybe for specific situations. Then that's all I think we've checked today. So There are some practical exercises in the notes usually provided for you to do. Maybe I usually provide 3 after every. So I think they're in the website. I think it was uploaded. I'm not sure. So let me create an example. And in this example, I want to, let's write this together. I want to write a function that accepts a number as input. So that is a leakage. It must be an integer. So accept a number as an input. So meaning it must be an integer. That's a leakage. Then it raised an exception if the number is negative. When I write this, what comes to my mind is a 0, less than 0. So let's start. We start by defining the function. Okay, we start by defining the function. So define check underscore number. So I'll just call it check, and you can call it anything. Then because I want the user to input the number, I'm going to call the number here. Then after calling the number, I'm going to check if number is less than 0, what happens? If number is 0, it's going to raise what? The value error. And it's going to be negative number not allowed. So negative allowed. Then it return the number. Okay, what the user will input, it can return it if you want. So after doing that, I'm going to try. Remember, where is try used? Where we think that the error might occur. So I'm going to try number. This is where I'm going to say, remember it was write a function that accepts a number. So I start with int, and then I ask the user to input. I open the bracket again. I write enter a number. Enter a number. Then I'm going to check the number, call my function, call check underscore number. After checking the number, it checks the number together with the parameter. That's what the user has inputted. Then I'll check except, and that is the value error as what? As E. Then I'll print E. Else, that is, remember this one is going to be executed if the value error occurs. Else means that the value error doesn't occur. So I'm going to print, meaning the user has entered a positive number. I say valid number. So number is what? Valid number is going to be the number that the user has inputted. So remember, I'm calling it in the print, and it has been defined here. I must use this type of bracket. Let's run and see. I think that's all. So enter number 0. Enter valid number. Okay. 0 is greater than, is not less than 0. So enter a number -2. Negative number not allowed. The value error has been called. Okay. Enter a number 6. Valid number 6. So else has been done because the value error has not occurred. So the else has been printed. Guys, I think that's all for today. I have enjoyed these sessions. I don't know. So if you have a question, you can ask the question.